Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Walking the Talk series, our webinar number 2, Walking the Talk with Bonus Culture. We are going to get started here in just a few moments. But as you are coming into the space, we wanted to just make sure that everyone had a moment to kind of get settled. So if you were here last time, this might seem familiar to you, but if you're not, please just go ahead and introduce yourself. Please share your name, your pronouns, and the industry you're in. My name is Dane. I'm the marketing associate here at Agility Consulting, and I'll kind of be your background person here with Trivani while she hosts this webinar. So if you have any technical issues, just let me know. And my pronouns are she, her, hers. I've been with Agility here for about almost a little over a year now. It's gone by really fast. So really excited to have you all here with us today. Like I said, just please go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat, and we will get started here in just a few moments. Hi, welcome, welcome, welcome. If you're just joining us now, you are in Walking the Talk with Bonus Culture. We're going to get started here in just another moment. My name is Dane. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I will be your kind of webinar support today. If you have any questions, just let me know and I will help you through it. In the meantime, go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat with your name, your pronouns, your industry. We would just love to know who's in the room with us today. And then just a few reminders, you have a couple different ways that you can participate today. You can drop your questions in the Q&A, you can drop them in the chat. We'll try to get to them throughout the webinar, but if we can't, we'll get to them towards the end. We should have ample time for Q&A at the end. And then just a reminder, we are recording this, so we will send this out as well as any other resources that are mentioned. So with all that said, I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and pass it off to Trivani so we can get started.
Thanks, Dane. Hi, everyone. If you were with us last week, good to have you back. And if you're new, I'm going to dive right into why we call this session Walking the Talk with Bonus Culture in just a sec. But as an intro, I'm Trivani. I also use she, her pronouns. I live right outside of Nashville. And I'm an associate partner on our team here at Agility on the consulting side. We are heavily focused on making sure people love their work and don't leave it. And so today's topic, bonus culture, is an important piece of doing that. So let's dive right in to this buzzword that is DEI. It started off as a thing that we all cared about, and it became a thing that now we question, right? Every organization has it in their values. But I think there are some times where we feel like, man, I think we're missing the mark in the way we live this out internally. Some staff are wondering, is this really important? Or is my organization checking the box? I don't want that. There are some other staff who aren't thinking about it this much. They're not impacted at all. The systems might be unclear, but they're still having a good experience. And so they're unaware that their colleagues have concerns. And so the result is variance. We pay a lot of attention to variance at Agility. We look at average employee experience, but we also pull apart, are people having a different experience that matches their identity group? And that's not ideal. That is where we would define it as an inequitable system. And if you're running in an equitable system, you're going to lose talent. The workflows are not going to be ideal. And your ability to hit your mission really feels far away. And so we're doing some work here at Agility to help our clients walk the talk. We want to move the buzzword from the website away and pull this into a thing that people feel every day when they interact. And so what does walking the talk look like? It looks like we're adjusting policy and we're adjusting process. At Agility, we do that in a few different ways. We have search process support for our clients, and we look at the opportunities to make sure diverse talent have access to your roles in your organization. We look at compensation policy and make sure there aren't a ton of exceptions in how people are paid and why they make more money. And we look at your performance management system and figure out, is there a stall when people are trying to access success? So today, our session is going to focus on the bottom two. There's an overlap that a lot of our clients are talking about between compensation and performance management, and it comes up when they ask for bonuses. We're going to do a deep dive into all the areas where white dominant culture shows up in your talent processes in our Walk the Talk cohort. We hope that if this is an interesting topic to you and your talent team is trying to think about ways that you can infuse this into your work, that you consider joining our cohort. Our goal is to get a group of talent leaders together throughout the year, starting in October, to spend some time unpacking where we can do more of this in the talent life cycle. So if you have questions about this, we'd love for you to reach out. We're going to give you a snippet of that in our session today. So how do we walk the talk with bonus culture? Trevani, what are you talking about? You may or not even heard this term. Let's talk about what we mean when we say bonus culture. Bonus culture is when we hear our clients name that their staff are asking for a bonus all the time. People are wondering, when are they going to get extra awards based on the stuff they feel that they're doing that's important? It might sound like, hey, I always take on extra projects. Or, hey, I'm carrying someone else's work. Excuse me, no one else has been here as long as I have. I think I've grown, but I'm not getting a promotion. So maybe at least I can get a bonus. I exceeded my goals. I did way more than we set out to do. Am I getting a bonus? I'm always supporting the team. Am I getting the bonus, right? There's this felt sense of not being compensated for contributions. And for us, the root of that, is I don't feel valued. I don't feel seen. I don't feel acknowledged for my contributions. Dane, I see you nodding there. What's coming up for you?
Yeah, I think this is so common, especially, in the nonprofit space. We see a lot of this happening with people just jumping in and covering work, and it just becomes kind of an accepted part of the culture. And I think people don't acknowledge the harm that it is actually happening to their colleagues who are really stepping in and taking on all this extra stuff. So
yeah, such a good call out. I think people want to feel seen and valued for their work. And so it sounds like a lot of ask for bonuses, but does that mean we should be giving lots of bonuses? That's kind of the question I imagine some of you are here to answer. What this means for us is that there's likely a lacking recognition strategy. If there are not really strategic ways to recognize the impact your staff are having, it shows up in multiple requests for bonuses. So let's talk about the difference between bonus and recognition, right? Doesn't mean either of these is bad, but they are different. Bonuses sound like, if you do this, you get that, right? There's an expectation around an output. Recognition sounds like, thanks for doing this, right? I noticed this thing. Thank you for doing that. Bonuses incentivize certain behaviors. So if you're giving out a bonus, the ideal expectation is people do more of the thing that they earned a bonus for. It's a tangible incentive. Recognition is acknowledging the things that people are doing because they wanted to do them, right? And so it's not quite the same motivation. Bonuses increase the behaviors that trigger the reward. Sorry, I just said that. And then bonuses increase or don't increase motivation. I think we assume that if I'm going to give bonuses, then people are going to be more motivated to do a thing. It's not quite what the research says is showing up. Bonuses feel like, congratulations, you did this thing. And so here's something to acknowledge it. Recognition feels like appreciation. I'm really grateful that you've contributed in this way. And so it's really important to pause and think about, when should we be giving out bonuses, or when do we need to do more recognition? Both of these things can be appropriate, but they should be strategic. And I think a lot of our clients are grappling with this idea that we haven't done these things strategically. We've done them reactively to make sure that our staff are feeling cared for, but we would like to be more strategic about it. So would love to have you jump in the chat for me and share, where are you all leaning? Do you have heavy bonus culture? Do you have really strategic recognition plans? Where are you leaning? Love to give you a second to think about that. Dane, anything else coming up for you here? Any reactions you're having to the content so far?
I think this is so interesting, Trevani, and I really love that you are showing us this difference between bonus and recognition, and when one is more valuable than the other. I think a lot of times I think it's often that people will miss the mark here, and they might have the best of intentions, but they're not quite sure which one to do. So this is just very interesting, I think. So yeah, and please continue to share out in the chat. We would really love to hear what y'all are thinking. I'm sure this is bringing up a lot.
Perfect. I see in the chat, some people get bonuses and some people don't. I think that is common. I think lots of our clients are asking that question. How do we adjust that? And I think it is you should expect that people are going to notice it and ask questions about it. Please continue to add to the chat so we have context about what's happening in your organizations. I'm going to move us forward and keep that going. So let's look at the data. We always like to start and ground our sessions in how these tactics affect employee engagement. Some really good research from the Human Element at Work and in a partnership with a study they did with Gallup that said 40% of staff feel like they only get recognition a few times a year or less. So it's rare, right? And of that 40% who feel like I don't really get a ton of recognition, 74% of them say I probably won't be here next year, right? I don't get a ton of recognition. I'm more likely to be moving on. And then 5 times more likely to be disengaged. So maybe they're saying, but they're not happy about it. And so recognition goes a long way to supporting staff feeling seen and cared for and valued. And bonuses don't always have that same impact. I really like the way this study did a deeper dive on variance. That's, again, what I told you we care a ton about at Agility, that if that belonging is not represented in recognition strategy, it affects people of color to a deeper extent. I'll give you a second to process this chart. There's a ton of benefits in dialing up the recognition strategy. It is important for all staff to feel seen and valued, but it's even more important for your people of color for that to be a really common practice in your organization. So we've spent some time talking about bonus culture, but I'm gonna pull an audible here and adjust the title of the session. Let's actually talk about walking the talk with recognition and rewards. Not so much about bonuses, right? It's important if that's something you do that people have clarity, but what does rewards and recognition strategy look like holistically? There's 3 tactics that I hope you'll walk away with today. The first one is, what's your philosophy about bonuses and recognition? Staff want to understand, when are you going to give them and why? How would you know what to look for? The second thing we'll talk about is how to diversify your tactics so that rewards and recognition strategy actually resonates with your team. And then lastly, how do you engage your managers, right? Does your management team know their role in your recognition strategy? So that's where we're going for the rest of the session. Let's take the first one, developing your recognition philosophy. Some of the sentiments we named earlier can be addressed really effectively through bonuses, and some are more likely to cause harm if you're giving bonuses. And so let's detangle that for a sec. When we think about a typical bonus tactic, I'm looking at tenure. Tenure is a common bonus policy where the organization is providing some kind of tangible reward for staying for a long time. And organizations who care about this might say things like, the longer you're here, the more you know our stakeholders, the more you know our business, the better you are at your job. And so we want you to stay, and we will incentivize those behaviors with things like a one-time tenure bonus every 5 or 10 years, additional PTO, it increases the longer you're here, a sabbatical, every X years, you get to take extra time away to say thank you and to recognize that contribution you've made, or increased vesting of your 401k. So that's one area where a bonus is common and makes a lot of sense, and it actually does resonate with staff. Here's a couple others. When you're exceeding your goals, as I think I saw in the chat, merit pay and commission makes sense. When people are going above and beyond with the targets you set, I think it's appropriate to say there's additional funding, and so we're going to distribute that for the people who are doing the work. If you're carrying someone else's work, we've supported a lot of clients with a coverage pay policy. That means so-and-so is out on parental leave, or we've got a vacancy that's going to take us 3 to 4 months to fill. How are we reallocating that work? And where are we asking people to absorb or take on more? If we're doing that, a stipend or a temporary one-time increase in pay makes a ton of sense. Those things are representative of contributions above and beyond that you would want to incentivize or compensate people for. Areas where recognition makes more sense are things like this. I'm always taking on extra projects. I'm growing, but I'm not getting a promotion, or I'm always supporting the team. If you provide bonuses for these things, they might feel like a slap in the face, and that is not the intent. No one is doing any of these things for the reward. They're doing it because they care about their job. They're intrinsically motivated to learn and stretch, to grow their skills, to help others. And so we're not paying people for doing those things, but we should recognize it. And so careful if you are getting feedback from your staff that a bonus policy feels transactional, feels like if you do this, we'll give you this. That's not the intent. And so instead, we want to talk about where recognition might make more sense. On the left side, we're thinking about bonuses for meeting the bar or bonuses for going above and beyond. And this is something I hear a lot of our clients struggling with. We want to reward people, but we have concerns about constantly handing out rewards when people do the job we've paid them to do. So you would want to get clarity on when a bonus policy makes sense for your organization. On the right side, we're thinking about the kind of things people do that we need to pause and recognize. What are the things we do when we see them? And how often should we be talking to people about the progress they're making, the things we appreciate about their work? There is some limits to that. If you do too much of that, it starts to feel disingenuous, feels fake, doesn't actually land, doesn't actually affect engagement at all. So what does it sound like to develop philosophy around how you handle bonuses, how you handle recognition in your organization? Here's a sample bonus philosophy, an area where here's when we're going to give additional rewards. And I said sample really intentionally. This can look a lot of different ways. The only thing staff care about is that it's clear. So you'll want to have some clarity on your guiding beliefs. When are you thinking about providing additional rewards? There's language in this sample that says when people do more than we set out for them, and when the organization can't afford it, right? That fiscal health is important. We want to provide rewards for people doing more than their share. So that's your guiding why. Why are we giving bonuses, right? You might clarify areas where we don't give any rewards. Tenure is not an expectation for a reward, right? It's up to you to decide if that's something you want to incentivize. Talk with a lot of clients about this idea that sometimes people should leave. Sometimes people are going to be ready for a new thing. And sometimes retention is not healthy. Some attrition is healthy. It's great when people leave and go do something else and tell people about the great work they did while they were with us. And so some of our organizations make a decision not to incentivize tenure. We want people to have a really successful tour of duty with us. And then we expect they're going to move on. So you might clarify that if that's not a thing that people should expect a bonus around. Similarly, we have lots of organizations that have sales focus and they decide that commission makes sense. Commission is typical for a sales role, but it's not required. You can pay people well and not give commission and retain a sales force. One of my favorite experiences is when I was hunting for a home and I leveraged Redfin. This is not a Redfin ad, but if you've ever worked with a realtor, you know that they operate on commission and they are incentivized to take you to that big house that might be out of your budget. My Redfin agent said to me, like, I don't actually work on commission and I make just as much money if you choose to be this big house or this small house. I'm here to support you. And so the behaviors that were incentivized out of that were different than if they were operationalizing a commission incentive. So those are choice points. It's not bad to offer a tenure bonus or a commission, but you want to clarify what it means for your culture. Here are a couple of examples where you might say, yes, actually, when people go above and beyond their target, that's when we provide bonuses. When people carry more responsibilities, that's when we provide a stipend or a one-time incentive for carrying the work. And so here is where you should just find your clarity and communicate it to staff. Let's look at a recognition example. Similar guiding beliefs, right? But the language here is about knowing that people aren't doing this to be rewarded. They're not expecting you to pat them on the back, but they do want to be acknowledged for their hard work because they care a ton about your mission. And so you'll want to guide people to understand when you're focused on recognition, what should they expect? Working together with your management team, you should clarify what deserves recognition, right? Like, hey, when we see these things, we should all pause and make sure to acknowledge them as often as it feels genuine to do so. That might be people taking on those stretch projects. We didn't ask them to do that, or we didn't require that of them, but we notice it and we appreciate it. And when they're doing it, we should pause and talk about it. When people get better at their jobs, it's also another opportunity for recognition to say, hey, you're making us better because you're making yourself better. And we know you're not doing that because you expect to be compensated, but we can't help but acknowledge it. And then lastly, when people take care of each other, they're not doing that for a bonus. They're doing it because they care, but they do want that to be acknowledged. And so clarifying when you encourage your management team to pause, and not just your managers, but your full staff to celebrate each other is important. All right, so this is philosophy. In a minute, we're going to dig into tactics, but welcome you all to join me in the chat. Any questions you're having so far about what you might include in your philosophy, where you're having feedback from staff that you might want to react to? Welcome you all to drop in the chat.
Yeah, and if anyone would actually like to vocalize their question, you can go ahead and use the raise hand button and I can bring you off mute. I know that sometimes our questions can seem very long and we don't feel like we have a lot of time to write them down. So that is always an option as well.
Agreed. Thanks for that, Dane.
Yeah.
Any questions? I'll sit here for a sec. All right. Keep them coming. Don't hesitate to slow us down if you want to pause for a second. Let's move into our second objective, which is diversifying our tactics, right? So if we know our guiding philosophy, why we're going to do what we do, what are those opportunities for extra rewards? What are those opportunities to pause and celebrate and acknowledge people? What are the ways we do that, right? What tactics actually land with our team? This is an important PSA. Everyone's doing shout outs. Shout outs are great in moderation. If you're overusing shout outs as your primary recognition tactic, there's a world where people don't feel those anymore, right? They're important, but they can't be the only thing you're doing to acknowledge people. And so we highly encourage you to think about other things you could do so that people feel seen and cared for. So let's look at a few options. We're going to give you some tips and suggestions here. Step one, lighten the mood. Try superlatives or important, funny awards. Build time in to celebrate how people contribute to each other. Bonus points here if people vote. So if it's not you as the manager or the leader acknowledging, but creating an environment where people acknowledge each other goes a long way towards recognition and engagement. Second tip is to center the impact. If you are collecting feedback from your stakeholders, package that. That's the thing people are in the work for. I remember when I was an educator, anytime I could get some feedback from a staff member that I supported, a parent that I helped, a student who really felt inspired and motivated around their work, this went a long way. And I think as we look at the nonprofit sector more broadly, we don't always get to hear how we're impacting the stakeholders that we work with. So when a leader can pull that together and reflect back the impact a staff member is having, it resonates because that's why they're in this work. So think about ways that you could create some visual representation of that work. Nurture their bellies, right? Like food is good. I think in organizations that are fully remote, it feels like you can't get together for lunch. That's a great way to say, hey, I want to just stop for a second and acknowledge the great work we do together. You can still do that virtually, or you can find ways to pull your team together for a meal. It's a great time to just pause with them and celebrate what they're accomplishing. Create some space. This is my favorite one. I think, as Dane mentioned earlier in the session, it is pretty typical for people to just grind. They care a lot about your mission. They care a lot about the work that's tasked of them. And so creating space is not a thing that naturally occurs in many of our clients' workflows. And so I love finding those opportunities to say, hey, I'm going to do this for you. And it's just because you already do so much, right? Or, hey, I did have a meeting on our calendar, but the point of today's meeting was to tell you to go take a walk. I want to pause and celebrate how hard you work all the time. Take a break. If your staff are not creating space for themselves to breathe and learn and stretch, you doing that can go a long way. Share some feedback, and this is more of an internal lens than this centering impact. Sometimes it's really nice for people to just be able to share with each other. If you're collecting that as a manager, it goes a long way. It's not just me saying, I see you. It's me saying, hey, your teammates see you. Your staff see you. Here's what they appreciate about you. Keep doing it. It's working. And then lastly, prioritize the debrief. Can't tell you how often teams grind through a really important or difficult task or project, and we don't pause to say, hey, that was successful. Why was it successful? How did you contribute? How did we contribute? Where did your strengths show up? Where are those opportunities for me to celebrate what you accomplished and why we were successful in the first place? And so pausing to talk about that can really go a long way. I think we've got a really deeply engaged but quietly reflecting audience today. So we won't slow down too much here, but would love to see you drop in the chat other things that people have done with you or for you, other things that you've done as a manager that really left your staff feeling appreciated in your recognition strategy. What's resonating? What would you add? What else have you tried?
Giovanni, I just have to say, I really love these tactics that you've listed here. I know that when I was a people manager, I definitely used, I think, nurture their bellies quite a few times because that seemed to go over very well with my team. And then also as someone who was, in the nonprofit space, fundraising, the prioritization of the debrief was such an important thing because after you do such a big project like a gala or, something like that, you need to have space to really celebrate those wins, and I think we're always so caught up in that moment of having to push forward that, we don't give ourselves the space to really celebrate those wins, and I think even as the manager, you want to celebrate that win too. So these are all really beautiful.
Love that. Yeah, absolutely. I think one connection I'll make to our compensation work here and why these things matter so much is we have a lot of clients who feel really stretched in paying full market salaries for their workforce. And so it feels to them that they can't retain or attract staff if they can't pay more than market rate, right? Or they can't provide bonuses and rewards. And what staff across our clients are constantly saying to us is that matters, but not as much as this, right? I want to be appropriately valued for my work, but I also want to be appreciated for my work. And so sometimes we see clients leveraging their compensation strategy or their payment system to support the recognition, and it doesn't feel like it resonates with staff. This is why. It's likely that you've missed some opportunities to recognize folks instead of just paying them for the work. Both things are important. Beautiful. All right, let's keep going here. And let's talk about how you might engage your managers in your recognition strategy. So this last piece is critical here. When we think about the language and employee experience surveys often speaks to both leadership and management. We don't untangle enough who should be doing what to make staff feel seen and cared for. Here's an example of a Harvard Business Review survey that says when a leader is good at giving recognition, it dramatically affects engagement. So when leaders aren't rated well for their ability to give recognition, most of their staff are not engaged, right? And when leaders are great at it, it has a huge impact. And so who do we mean when we say leader? What is that about? And how does that support a recognition strategy? So I'll tell you a little bit about how we might think about it at Agility. Leadership is often considered a broad term. When staff are taking an employee experience survey, they might be thinking of a lot of people when they see the term leadership. They might be thinking about their manager. They might be thinking about their manager's manager. And they might only be thinking about the leaders of the organization. So chief level, C-suite level. When they think about manager, they're typically thinking about the person who does their performance review, who did their onboarding and hiring. Some organizations that we support are matrixed. And so they might have a project manager who is heavily involved in giving them feedback, who is not their direct manager. And so when you see these two terms, just keep in mind that staff are thinking about different audiences. When we look at our our talent equity assessment, we're pulling both of these things here at Agility. We want to understand how people see leadership in these areas, modeling our values, keeping people motivated, being accessible and accountable is important for all of leadership. And on the management side, there's a little bit more of a personal expectation for how managers support staff. So neither of these groups of people are off the hook for your recognition strategy. There has to be a balanced approach. If it's not balanced and it's heavily leaning on one side or the other, it might feel like this. If your recognition strategy is leadership heavy, it sends the message of the white dominant culture characteristic of power hoarding, right? I'm the one who gets to recognize people. I have not really thought about how my managers have a role in that. When it's on the other side of that and managers are heavily driving recognition, it sends the us versus them binary that we're in this together. I don't know what they think about you, right? And so it might sound like I'm a people manager and I don't have any tools to motivate my staff or manage morale. My staff are saying to me, they don't feel cared for, they don't feel seen or supported. I don't really know what I can do about it. I don't have a budget for this, right? On the other side of this, it might sound like, hey, I have really good feedback about my manager. I feel very supported based on who my manager is. But I don't know if the organization cares about me. And a lot of times as I'm supporting leaders through looking at their staff data, they see this organization cares about me note and they wonder, who are they talking about, right? And what we want to approach in this situation is how do leaders and managers work together in your recognition strategy? So let's look at some tactics here for a more balanced version. The leadership's role is to create space and dialogue on your culture strategy. Where are you asking people about their experience with you? Where are you giving them a chance to say, hey, when you all do this, feels like a place I want to work. Or when you do this, feels like a place I don't want to work. How are you asking your team to weigh in and give you clarity on what's working and what's not? The next thing the leadership can do is think about where recognition is being spread. If you're looking at your staff survey data or you're thinking about conversations you're having in your skip level meetings, ask where they feel recognized and acknowledged and appreciated. And then pay attention to who's getting that. Are you seeing variance? Do you notice that some identity groups feel more appreciated than others? Do you notice that some teams do better at this than others? Your job as a leader is to make sure recognition is felt across the organization and not isolated based on any of the factors I just named. Provide clarity around budget and autonomy for managers to be responsive. Imagine this manager has watched their team go through a really tough project and they want to do something, or they see someone learning and stretching, want to send them a book on the thing they're learning and working on. Is there budget for their recognition opportunities, or are they reliant upon leadership to find opportunities that require some monetary support? If that's the case, they might feel that us, them, and they might translate that to conversations with their staff unintentionally. They might say things like, I'd really love to do something for us, but I need to go check and see if I'm allowed, if I have permission, if I have budget. And then lastly, provide recognition for your managers. Your management team is likely the group that's not getting a ton of appreciation and feedback for how they're leading. And if you aren't thoughtful about it, that can trickle to the way they're navigating with their team. So leaders have a really critical role in recognition strategy. You want to make it safe for people to say when they're feeling cared for. You want to pay attention to who's getting recognition, because that translates to a lot of other factors of engagement. You want to make sure managers know where their decision-making power sits. And you want to check on your managers and make sure they're feeling celebrated for their impact as a people manager. So what should the manager be doing in terms of the recognition strategy? The manager should be elevating staff strengths so that the leaders can celebrate alongside. Sometimes that looks like CCing a senior leader on an email where you're celebrating your staff so they can chime in, right? If you're not creating line of sight into the work, it's really tough for leaders who aren't in the work to know what to celebrate. And so look for those opportunities to say, hey, just need to elevate my team member here for this really great work. And that invites space for your leaders to chime in. Next, provide timely responses of acknowledgement and contributions. If you wait too long to say, hey, I see you, I see the thing you're carrying, I see the thing you're trying, really appreciate that. It really can create some resentment if staff aren't seeing that acknowledgement and recognition on a regular basis. Interrupt that constant churn with celebration and appreciation. I'll share another personal example where this just was super powerful for me. I'm a former Teach for America core member, and if there are others who experienced that on the call, you might have had a TFA, which was a totally free afternoon, where we thought we were going into heavy PD programming, and actually it was just a break. It was, hey, we've got some fun stuff planned for you because you're always grinding. So what are those opportunities to pause the churn, because there's always work to do, and give people a chance to feel celebrated? Lastly, tell people when they are promotion ready, right? So when we do our staff surveys for our clients, recognition always alludes to promotions. A lot of times staff are answering questions about recognition from a lens of who's getting a new opportunity. And so there are some parameters there that we're going to spend a lot of time in our next session talking about. So if you're curious about, wait, what does it mean to say to a staff member, they're promotion ready? You should join us tomorrow. We're going to talk about that. But in the short term, I'll give you this tidbit, is that there are lots of places where people are ready for a role and a role doesn't exist. And so acknowledging that, hey, you probably could do more than this goes a long way. And so it's the manager's job to keep a pulse on what people are carrying when they're starting to stretch and grow in really significant ways, and tell them that. So that's what we're covering today. We're actually wrapping up and want to give you some space for Q&A. Would love to hear what's coming up for our audience if there are questions. Great time to come off mute and raise your hand and let us know what's top of mind. Dane, anything coming up for you as people are potentially finding the unmute button?
Yeah, we had, we did have some questions pop up. I think this was mentioned earlier, just kind of about stipend programs. Are those in your work, are those becoming more popular for organizations to take on?
Yeah, we have lots of clients who are trying to create stipend criteria. I think where they felt inconsistency or potential inequity is that they're wanting to react to people carrying more and provide a stipend, but they're using past expectations to make decisions about that. So what did we give a stipend in the past, and how much did we give then? How different is this, and how much should we give now? And that doesn't always feel good. So we've worked with some clients to create stipend criteria and a tiering system. So how some of the criteria there have been: how visible is this work? How risky is the work we're asking people to take on? How much time does that work require? And how directed or facilitated is that work? Sometimes you're asking people to take on extra work where you're saying, here's the things, here's all the steps, just need some extra capacity. Other times you're asking people to take on work that says, this thing is undefined, but it needs to be solved. Can you go solve it? And those tasks should not be stipended in the same way. And so we're working with a lot of clients to create some criteria proactively versus what feels like bias and favoritism, leaning into who asked for it, how much do we like them, how much do we want to keep them and retain them, and therefore how much can we pay for this extra load they want to carry. Beautiful question. I didn't see it, so I'm glad you're catching.
It was just one of those that got directly to me, not not to literally chat.
Any other questions popping up? Okay.
I think this was one of those spaces where there was so much information and so much to absorb that it's hard to kind of find those questions. So yeah, no worries if you don't have your question ready now. We will send out our follow-up email, and of course you can reach out to us or catch us tomorrow in our next webinar. So that's always a possibility.
Yeah, I'm excited to do one of my favorite things that I think we actually talked about today is give you some time back, right? So
yeah.
thank you for joining us. I think we can wrap up here in a second. We would love to get your feedback. Let us know what was helpful about today. Again, if you're interested in learning more about our Walk the Talk cohort, we'd be happy to chat with you about that. We know there are lots of people on this call who care about really matching their values to their actions and making sure staff feel it. And so we want to support you with that. So Thank you for the time. Dane, anything you would add?
No, thank you all so much for joining us today. And we hope to see you tomorrow for promotion readiness. I know Travani mentioned that a little bit of that today. And so hopefully we'll see some of you tomorrow for that. But until then, have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you for sharing this with us.
Take care.